Okay, hello everybody. My name is Koprivnikar and I come from Slovenia. So I know that I'm the last thing that stands between you and beer and food. So, so I'll try to make this quick. First of all, I'm part of the IBM Cloud Group. I am also, like I think Igor said in the beginning, an OpenStack newbie. I cover more the part of the DevOps part of cloud in IBM. And today I'll be basically talking a little bit about adoption of cloud and DevOps and how that links very nicely to OpenStack. If you have any questions during my presentation, please feel free to jump in. And I'll do some talking, but in the end I'll also show a demo, how some of the stuff which we have works. So it won't be too boring. Okay, so we all pretty much know the world today. You know, what do we see outside, how people use their IT systems. Basically, we still have a lot of this, you know, where everything is quite manual, which brings along its own set of challenges. Mainly that, you know, our environments are never the same, you know, we run into issues with that and so on. And usually, you know, the application changes are small and quite frequent, whereas in the infrastructure changes are a little bit bigger and they usually take more time. And also these days, there's, you know, a lot of not just talk, but also action in the area of how to mix private and public systems and mix private and public cloud. And whoever actually tried this knows that, you know, it's not that easy in the end. Usually how an adoption path will look like is, you know, people will have everything traditional on-premise, they'll do things manually. Maybe on top, you know, you'll do some automation, either, you know, using Chef, Puppet, something like that, or Ansible, or, you know, our own tooling. How we see it, you know, as the next step to actually move forward is that, you know, you start slowly automating the deployment of infrastructure so that you have sort of an infrastructure as a service. OpenStack comes in as a natural fit there, right? But, you know, still building on top of that, there's quite a few layers which, if they're not automated, you know, sort of it's not the right thing. You know, and as a final step, we see platform as a service. You know, so that you basically get the whole thing bundled, you throw on your apps, and things just simply work. But now let's go towards the infrastructure as a service part, and basically OpenStack and some of the OpenStack providers which we have out on the market. OpenStack for IBM is, as you probably know, also a very strategic platform. We are one of the companies which is basically contributing a lot to OpenStack, and we are building a lot of our solutions on OpenStack. So we have, you know, tooling to actually, which incorporates OpenStack and does the orchestration then on top of it. And we are also, you know, making tooling that makes consumption of OpenStack easier. So I'm not going to explain, you know, what kind of components we have here. That's been said a lot here. I'm going to, however, mention heat a little bit. Like you heard before, basically heat is a template engine which consumes hot. Well, that's funny way to pick names. And in our technology, the stuff that I'm going to show later on, we leverage this a lot because we basically created some tooling which makes using hot quite a bit more user-friendly than it is out of the box, and extended it also to a degree. Okay, so if we do some sort of you know, deployment in cloud, how it usually looks is, you know, that the whole thing, the whole application part is usually deployed quite iteratively. So it's, you know, it's going to be small increments, automated, and so on and so on. And on the bottom part, when you do the infrastructure, that can be quite a long process, which has its complexity, and it has a lot of wait time basically built in. And this is basically a bottleneck when deploying applications, and this is something that needs to be changed in the future. So how we envision it, so as a way to do it in the future, is that the whole infrastructure is basically code. So that you design the infrastructure, what kind of nodes do you have, how are they connected, what kind of software is on there, and this is basically designed and created by the developers, the integrators, so the operations people, and it is maintained as an environment blueprint. And then the environment blueprint is actually read, deployed, and from that you actually get an environment. The environment actually envelops everything from compute nodes, storage, network, and the applications on top. So, this is a very nice story, but you know that these days is actually quite difficult to actually manage our environments in this way. But I want to show you that it's not necessarily that difficult. We're making really good steps in that direction. So if you do something like this, what does that actually bring you? Well, it actually brings you the option to manage infrastructure as code. Well, that's a pretty cool thing, because then any change within your system, be it a code change in an app, be it a change in your environment, is basically just a change. It's nothing else, right? Because it's all code. And that means that you can actually version your blueprints. You can share them around, store them. If you have multiple teams, they have the same blueprint, they deploy the same to the same environment, and use the same app. Actually, we also give the option to apply changes to your blueprint, so to your environment, onto an already existing environment. So that you can actually, if you have an environment deployed, you can just roll the changes on top of it. And it's really easy then to actually verify if your pattern works okay, if your blueprint is correct, right? You just stand it up, see if everything works, run some tests, okay, this thing works. And on top of that, if you have a blueprint which is you're going to run in a production environment, that blueprint is going to be deployed maybe hundreds of times during development, testing, and everything else before it's actually going to be deployed in production. So you can be relatively sure that the thing actually works. Oh, again, you always have that case, 1 in 1,000, but still, it's for sure a way better situation than the operations team stand up a new environment, and then you're going to deploy production load onto it, and then stuff breaks because somebody forgot to do something somewhere. Okay. And on top of that, this sort of approach actually gives you the flexibility to maybe use different types of clouds during your development lifecycle. So you'll take basically the same environment blueprint, with the definition of the operating system, the connections, the middleware, the application, and so on, and maybe deploy it on Amazon while you do the testing. Or the development, and then once you put it into production, maybe you'll have your own instance of OpenStack. You're going to deploy it on that, right? Because it's your own servers, and maybe it's really high performance, and so on and so on. So that actually gives you more flexibility when you use it. So how do we do all this magic? Well, we actually have some tooling in this area, which is called Urban Code Deploy with Patterns, which approaches this in a very interesting way. So, like I said before, the heat engine inside OpenStack can be leveraged to actually drive any OpenStack, so any OpenStack implementation to deploy workload. And Urban Code Deploy with Patterns has a few things that help you here. So it has a designer of the patterns, so that you can actually, inside the tool, put together whatever you need inside your environment. I'm going to actually show that later on. And it also gives you the option to design it once and then deploy onto multiple providers. So we all know that these providers, they're not all the same. So we offer some sort of customization option where you would basically configure what kind of parameters, how you are going to actually mirror the parameters between one cloud implementation and the other. So we sort of have a translation module which lets you do that. And again, then it also enables you to actually manage the whole life cycle of your environment, so that your patterns or your blueprints are actually managed as source within the tool, and you can share them around and manage the changes inside them. So UCD with patterns actually supports Git out of the box, so you can just basically connect it to a Git repo, and everybody who's connected to the same Git repo is going to get the patterns, and if you change them, everybody gets notified about it. Okay, and then Urban Code Deploy with patterns actually is then connected to one or more cloud providers, and you just basically select to which one you're going to run, define the parameters specific to that cloud provider, and voila, your environment stands up. So, like I said before, basically all your patterns, so your environments, are managed as code. So Urban Code Deploy with patterns actually consumes that, takes it, when you trigger it, it can then deploy to a plethora of different cloud providers. Most of it is OpenStack on some level or another in the background, and all of it actually goes through the heat engine to actually achieve that. And the good thing is that with that you can then combine off-prem and on-prem solutions to actually achieve what you need to get the environments that you actually need. Okay, so I have a few screenshots here. I'm going to maybe just show them briefly so you have a feeling what it is, and then I'll also show the demo. So Urban Code Deploy with patterns, it's a web tool. It actually enables you to view the pattern itself in a GUI form, so you see what you're actually putting together, and lets you browse multiple patterns and then actually trigger provisioning of these patterns once you're happy with it. It gives you the option to actually work with the patterns in diagram and in source code. So basically, depends what you want to do. And the source in the background is basically hot. So it's a text file that basically describes the environment which you're going to deploy later on. And the palette, the stuff of things that you can throw into your pattern actually works seamlessly both in the graphical user interface or the text user interface. So I don't know, if you have a component here, you can actually drag it in and it's going to represent it in text form. If you drag it onto the graphical the designer is going to be presented in a graphical form. So UCD with P is actually connected in the background to the cloud provider. So for instance, if that's OpenStack, it's going to show you all the compute nodes you have inside, all the networks which are defined inside already. So if you create a new pattern, you can connect it to an existing network, or actually just draw in a new network, define the parameters for it, and it's going to create a new network where your machines are actually going to be thrown in there. And then you have the storage part. So if you have data stores already defined, storage volumes, you can reuse them or actually create new ones. But what's maybe even more interesting here is that we've extended the hot templates to the degree that we can now also incorporate applications inside of these templates. So we have a tool called Urban Code Deploy, which actually is a configuration management tool, like somebody explained before what's configuration management, which lets you define deployment processes for your applications. And of course, we integrate with that, and the processes for your applications which you have defined in the tool, you can actually reuse them here. So once you design how your nodes are going to look like inside your blueprint, you simply throw in the middleware and the applications which you're going to deploy, and then it connects in the background, and once your environment is stood up, the agent is installed, and the process for the deployment of the application also runs in the background. And of course, as you know, hot also supports auto-scaling. So there's also a possibility to define auto-scaling inside the tool. So early days, but you know, it's there. Okay, and the stuff that I actually mentioned before, we offer parameterization of between different cloud providers. Here you have an example of how a blueprint is going to be, how a configuration of a blueprint looks different for something that will run on Amazon. Basically, it just translates the parameters, or how it's going to look like if it runs on pure OpenStack. So you can basically select, okay, I'm deploying the blueprint, and you select which cloud provider you're going to use for that, and deploy the same blueprint on the different providers. Okay, just a little bit more stuff on the provisioning part, and you can see that basically, you run the same blueprint on two providers, and you can get it then on, for instance, Amazon and on a pure OpenStack environment. So, any questions before I show a short demo? No? Okay. So what I have here is a headless VM, which basically contains OpenStack in a single box, and I have access through basically a browser to Urban Code deploy with patterns running here, which I have to log into, and also the OpenStack, which I have here, and also an Urban Code deploy instance, which is in the background taking care of the deployment of the applications inside here. So when I come to Urban Code deploy, like I said before, it's a web tool, and it will show me all the environments which are already deployed and all the blueprints that I have created in here. So in this case, if I would want to have a new blueprint imported inside, I have the option to actually connect it to a repository, and I can add in new repositories, clone them, and work with these blueprints. So I already have a blueprint inside, so I'm not going to mess with this right now. But if I make changes, it's going to reflect here, and I can synchronize them with the repository. So then if I go into blueprints, here I actually have a single blueprint, which is a simple two-node application, which has a database server and an application server. And for this, I actually have a few configurations. One is for Amazon on Linux and on Windows, and one is for OpenStack. I'll just show the OpenStack Linux deployment, because I don't really have an Amazon connection here or an account, so I'm not going to mess with that. But you can see basically that this pattern is defined first in a graphical form. It tells me what kind of server do I have, what kind of middleware is on that server, and what kind of application I'm going to deploy here. So, as a simple user, if I would come in here, I'd say, okay, I want to deploy this type of pattern. I'd just simply say, okay, I want to provision this. I'll name it demo JKE, because that's how the application is called in the background. There's a number of patterns that I can actually define here. Everything between what kind of size of the machine I want to have, different parameters which are defined for this blueprint, which actually tell me, on which network are these machines going to be available on, what kind of server am I using, et cetera, et cetera. And when I have stuff set up, I can just simply say provision. Now, Urban Code Deploy is going to validate that this is a valid hot, and then talk to the heat through the API, and heat in the background is actually going to provision this on OpenStack. So while this is actually, now you can see it actually triggered, and if I go back here, I see I have it in between my environments, and I see that's actually being run. So right now it's building up the machines in the background. So this takes a while. So while this is happening, I'll go back and I'll show you the rest of the functionality for building the blueprints. Okay, so first of all, I have the palette here, which I also already mentioned before. You know, the things that I can use here are basically the components, the application components, which I have, the images that actually come from, in this case, OpenStack, because I'm using OpenStack as the provider, the networks which I have defined in OpenStack, the security credentials which I'm using here, the storage. You know, all of this stuff can simply be added into the application. And for instance, in my case, if I'd want to, I don't know, change this design, I'd just simply, I don't know, duplicate the app server machine. I'd, you know, simply copy one of the app server machines, paste it. Okay, that won't work. I can just simply, in some cases, just paste them in and you know, connect them into the network, and the thing will just work. On another instance, I can basically say I want to drop in an image. Onto that image, I want to drop in some middleware, so I'll do a Liberty profile on it, and then I'll also deploy a war application on it, which I already have here. So all the packages for this stuff are actually created in Urban Code Deploy. And that's going to be triggered on the machine when it's created, and that's going to deploy on top of it. You know, here we're just creating how these machines are going to be set up in the cloud. And actually with this, I'll tell my OpenStack that I know I need to, it needs to provision some machines for me. And these patterns can be quite elaborate, so you know, you can do quite a bit inside. And that with each new version of UCD, with patterns, you know, we get more and more functionality of how this actually runs. So hopefully now, this is actually provisioned. Beautiful. It's having demo fever. Yeah. Okay, this sometimes happens. I'll try to reprovision it. Otherwise, you know, we'll blame it on Mr. Murphy, and that's it. Give me a second. Okay, so now maybe we won't have the same issue. Okay. Well, I'm having some issues here with my demo environment, which is lots of fun. Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can maybe try to reprovision this, but the issue is that, you know, I put my machine into hibernation, because otherwise I'd have to start everything here. Sometimes it doesn't like that. Let's see. This looks promising. Okay, so while this is running, I'll actually go into Urban Code Deploy and actually show you how does the installation of application components and middleware components look like. So that's the stuff that we're actually integrating with. So Urban Code Deploy is the same thing. It's also a web tool, and it actually enables automation of application deployment and middleware deployment. And here we actually define these components which we're using in Urban Code Deploy with patterns, and then in templates in hot. So one of the things that we are doing here was basically deployment of enterprise archives, so a Java application. And how that is actually done, it's also quite graphical. We actually create a process that basically does all the steps necessary to deploy this application. And you know, the same way, this process uses some utility steps which are, let's say, specific to the middleware we are using, and it lets us describe the deployment process. So, you know, transferring over the artifacts which we are going to use, updates of the configuration files for this application, you know, maybe stopping the server, deploying then the application on the server. And in this case, we actually have the same process if we deploy on Linux and on Windows, and we switch if we have a Linux system, we're going to start the server with SH. If we have a Windows system, we're going to use PowerShell or command line to actually do that. So this is how you can actually describe the deployment process of the application in the background. So hopefully while I was showing that, this is now moving forward. Yeah, okay, that's a good situation. Now I can actually see that in OpenStack, I should have, yeah, I do. I should have the instances which this template actually described. They are running for the past few minutes, and they are actually still being provisioned. So that means that the application and the middleware are being installed on the images in the background. We see here that they are using usually more and more memory in disk. And this usually takes a couple of minutes, so my machine is not almighty. And usually takes a few minutes. And when actually it's done, you see here that you see your instances, you know what kind of IP addresses were they given on the network. And since I'm running this in VMware, my host machine is actually connected to the same network. And when this is actually complete, I can simply go in here, use the IP which I have here. I know that I have an application server on 9080, which is now still not available because this is still provisioning. But when it finishes, it should be. So, okay, so now this is progressing nicely. Yeah, okay, we still need the database and the Liberty profile to actually have this complete. While that's happening, I'll go back to the pattern which we have here, and I'll go a little bit through the source. You see here that basically it's a hot, so it's a template which is being generated by the tool, and your changes are basically, it has a validation which runs nonstop while you make the changes. So it actually does bidirectional updates. If you change it inside the source, or if you change it inside the diagram. And in this case, it actually has all the components described in the template, and it also has some script inside, for the installation of the agent for Urban Code Deploy, which is then actually going to run the automation to deploy the application. And again, if for instance, you would have the components here. If you click one of the components here, it's going to highlight it inside, or you can drag and drop them inside. So it's pretty well. It's easier to work with it than just to code it by hand. So, okay, now I think this is sort of slowly being completed. And I can actually, I think, go back to Urban Code Deploy and see if I have an activity ongoing already. So if I go to the work component, I see that, yep, this is actually, the request actually ran, so that means that this was deployed just now. So I think now it should be running up, yep. So now I have basically a machine up. It configured the middleware and installed my application. This is just a demo application we have here. And I can try to log in and see if it actually works. Yeah, it actually works. So it deployed the database server, it deployed the application server, it created the database, it deployed the application on top of it, and it's actually running here, and I can play with it. And I can also see it here, it's active. So that is how easy it's becoming, or it's going to be in the future. Now, of course, like since you're all OpenStack users and you know that this technology is emerging, it's changing a lot, and also we are constantly adding, updating our tooling to stay in touch with OpenStack development. So, if you have any more questions, I hope maybe I have some answers. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, so here we're actually using Urban Code Deploy to run the automation, so to deploy the application. And yes, Urban Code Deploy has, so let's say, plugins for different application servers, and they come basically with a tool out of the box, and it supports Webster Application Server, Webster Liberty Profile, which is a lightweight version of Webster Application Server, and WebLogic, JBoss, Tomcat, Microsoft IIS, and so on and so on. And also Urban Code Deploy in case you need, you have specific requirements or you need it for something else which we don't support out of the box, has a really extensible API, and you can simply create new plugins through Groovy, and run those plugins inside the deployment process. So it's quite easily extensible. We have some really nice experiences with some customers where we did POCs, and they looked at the plugins and they said, okay, yeah, this is really nice, it does the basics, but we have really complex applications. They spend a few days adding functionality to the plugin, and then use that plugin for the POC, and in a few days, basically, they supported what they needed. Yeah. Go ahead.
What you have shown here is the deployment looks like a platform as a service. What is the difference between a platform as a service like OpenShift or DevOps?
Well, it's not really platform as a service, because platform as a service. What do you mean?
With the platform as a service, you have the source code, and with every commit, it's starting a build process and deploying the application.
Yeah, well, this is basically an automated way to create, a bunch of machines instead of doing it manual and then deploying the applications on top of it, right? So it's not really platform as a service, although, yeah, it looks like it maybe from that perspective. Because platform as a service, like Cloud Foundry or something like that, or Heroku or the Bluemix, which we have, it works a little bit in a different way, right? You don't have to build it, it's already there. You just include the services which you have inside. So the paradigm is a little bit different, but yeah, maybe from the first view, from afar, it's, yeah, you'll just get a platform with one click of a button. Yeah. Any more questions? How's it licensed? Oh, you're talking about cost? What's the price?
I was hoping it was open source.
Yeah, well, corporations with three-letter names, we're not we usually sell our software, but today, yeah, you can see it for free. We do, however, if somebody's interested, it's available on ibm.com. You can download it, you can play with it, you can see what it does and how it does it. And like we always say, we're always ready to talk to a customer, and probably we come to an agreement also with price. So, but I'm not in sales, so I'm still sort of a technical person. So, huh? Yeah, I'm not trying to do sales. I'm trying to just show some interesting technology which we are creating on top of OpenStack. Just something that might become really interesting in the future. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.